Happy, beautiful, amazing evening. I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski with this week's version of the Conversation on Success, Mastering Our Inner Game. We've known for thousands of years that really how we show up in life, who we are at our core, is really the most important thing that we can share with the world. So, I have one very simple yet complicated objective. I want to help you to create the leverage that you need to live your best life. And by the way, that is not a typo. Probably the best leverage that we could ever create is through loving acts of kindness and loving ways of moving people towards their dream life. So here's a very simple summary. We want you to become the greatest you that you can be. We want you to show up consistently inspired and ready. And then very simply want to add value to everybody that's open to receiving it. And yes, we have value to add, but not everybody's open to receive it. So in those cases, why don't we just move on to people that are open to receiving it? So here's our topics to master the inner game. We're going to look at inner game versus the outer game and about 2,000 years of quotes leading forward to it. We'll talk about the golden circle, starting with why, Simon Sinek's great book and TED Talk. We're going to talk about one universal purpose or mission, Tony Robbins' S-cube strategy, which is manage your physiologic state and mental state, tell yourself an empowering story, and then work with an effective and winning strategy. We'll talk about the 7 C's of true success from Dr. Tom Morris. We'll look at the 7 skills of network marketing professionals, and then we'll mention Personal Development University, which, by the way, I recommend that we all attend daily. So I'm going to go back over 50 years. I was in first grade. And as my mother tells me, because I don't remember when I was 2, she said, as a toddler, I didn't sleep much. So she spent a lot of time reading to me. And she said I could start to recognize the words and even correct them and start to sound them out by age 2. So by the time I got to first grade, I was a pretty good reader. So the school thought, well, why don't we do a little experiment? We've got these group of kids that they called the TMRs, the trainable mentally retarded. Back then, we didn't have autism. That's probably replaced that group today. But these were kids that had Down's syndrome. And it was my first time ever for public speaking. I got in front of a group. They were very warm and welcoming. They gave me positive feedback all the way through. And certainly a great feeling when I finished. And I remember, Miss Murphy, congratulating me and telling me what a great job and how much the kids liked it. And I looked at her, I said, you know what? I'm glad for all that, but I have a question for you. Why do these kids all look so different? And what she told me literally has shaped my entire life since then. These words hit right at my core. Here's what she said. If you see something wrong on the outside, you know that something's wrong on the inside. So if someone's not creating the life that they want, very, very simply, it's an inside job. They've got to do the inner work, which, by the way, is never easy, but it is our lifelong mission and task to become our best self. So a lot of experts like to talk about the 80-20 rule, and same thing with Harvey Conner, which I'll introduce in a moment. He talked about the inner game of life, the inner game of network marketing versus the outer game. And the inner game is you, your beliefs, your self-image, your emotions, even your communication style. And the outer game is basically the skills, your actions and your words. Now, we got to get into action. Remember what Einstein said, nothing happens until something moves. And that certainly is true in networking. So almost 2,000 years ago, Epictetus, a slave who became a consultant to the emperor of Rome, he had such great wisdom. He said, look, in life, it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. It's not what happens, the outer game, but how you react, the inner game. And Ralph Waldo Emerson, 1850, said something like this that Jack Canfield, modern day, rephrased. But Emerson said something to the effect that who you are speaks so loudly, I can hardly hear a word that you are saying. So who you are, your inner game, is really the message that you are delivering. Wallace Wattles wrote The Science of Getting Rich. He did a great job getting rich himself, but here's what he said. Getting rich isn't about doing certain things. That's the outer game. It's about doing things in a certain way. That is the inner game. And then another fun quote from a celebrity, Mae West. Here's what she said: "It's not what you say, but how you say it." So, what you say again, outer game, how you say it. What do you bring to the party? What do you bring to the message? That is the inner game. Yogi Berra, baseball and really life is 90% mental. The other half is physical. And by the way, when I talk to these super high level achievers, they agree. The mental game, the inner game is about 90%, even at the highest level, whereas the skills and everything else, that is the outer game. Jim Rohn applied it to network marketing when he said, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Work on that inner game, maybe even before you start expressing the outer game. And then Harvey Conner with his book, My First 50 Years in Network Marketing. How fun for someone that has 5 decades in every single role in network marketing to come forward with this great book of wisdom that I highly recommend. But here's what he said: amateurs focus on skills, whereas experts focus on psychology. Amateurs are always looking at that outer game, that 20%, too often without mastering that inner game, that 80%. So we've got 3 different golden circles. The first golden circle, start with why, Simon Sinek's amazing talk. The next, looking at different parts of our brain. And I'll show you that most of our decisions are emotional, maybe even all of them. And then the inner game versus the outer game. I drew a different circle there because it is the 80-20 rule. At least 80% of our life is going to be the inner game. So it's said that we have 3 different brains. We have the reptilian brain. That's going to be our brain stem. That's fight or flight. And that takes over when we're in crisis. And keep in mind, if you're fighting or fleeing, you're probably not in a point where you want to make, really good connections with people and add value to their life. You're just focused on you and your next breath and getting out of trouble. Then we start going to that middle brain, the limbic system. They also call it the monkey brain. That's our emotional brain, and that's why. And by the way, we want to master that emotional brain. And then finally, the how, the thinking brain. If we really take our experience and learn how to apply it with changing times, we can figure out better ways than ever and faster ways to create the life that we're looking forward to. So I've been studying Brian Tracy for many, many decades at this point. He's got so many different things to teach and share and many resources. But he used to say, you know what, I used to think people were 50% logical and 50% emotional. Now I realize that we're all 100% emotional. It's just sometimes we justify logically the choices that we make, or we have greater emotion towards the logical decision. Very, very powerful look and understanding of human performance. I happen to like this picture for Start With Why, Simon Sinek's great book, because he's got a cup of coffee there. And in my world, every great day starts with a cup of coffee. And you know what? About 1 million cups a month is about what I'm responsible for sharing with the world. Better coffee, turbocharged, reishi infused coffee. So Simon Sinek and his TED Talk, millions, tens of millions of views. Why should be the center of everything that we do. So we want to start with our purpose. Then ultimately that'll expand to how we do what we do. And then finally, when we know our why, when we know our how, it directs what we do. And one of our mentors said, we're all here with the same purpose. It's universal to all of us. We're all here to show up as our best and getting better self in service to something bigger than ourselves. And then we start looking at how our life and our world evolves. If we're in survival mode, that's where we are. But once we get to where we know we're going to survive, then we become stable. Once we get stable, we look for a little more success. And then finally, we want to get to that pinnacle, which is significance, which is really helping others. So our why should evolve as we evolve. And possibly the best statement ever of why from Zig Ziglar, Ziglar's Law. He said, you can have everything in life that you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. Yeah, I remember hearing those words from him 35 years ago and saying to myself, wow, how can I help more people? Well, here's what I got to tell you. In my career as a chiropractor, I kind of help one person at a time. And that creates a little bit of a limited reach. But what if you could create leverage? What if you could create leverage? What if you could build a team all on the same page to make the world better? Well, I promise you, if you can do that, then the world is yours. So how we do it is professional networking. We get that leverage from personal development. Yes, a better us showing up better certainly has more leverage and leverage. We want to create relationships, always looking for the good of the person. And then finally, we want to use better products, which, by the way, in our case, have patented competitive advantages. And our coffee rated the best organic coffee in the world in 2022. So think about this for a moment. I remember reading this statement: your network is your net worth. And I started thinking about that. And I asked myself, number one, is this true? And then I thought about it. Who are the most successful people that I know? They all have a pretty good network. They're not all network marketers, but they all have a good network. And so then my next question for you, and it was for me, am I open to this principle working for me? Lone wolves can only go so far. And as Robin Sharman likes to say, the bigger the dream, the more important the team. Or as another of my mentors said, if you can achieve your goals all by yourself, your goals are obviously not very big. So can we rally a team? Can we build a team? Can we train a team? Can we inspire a team? If we can, then we can create our dream better, faster, stronger, smarter than ever. So what do? We distribute healthier products that are in high demand. I can't think of any more high demands than coffee or tea. Health is in demand. They are convenient, they are delicious, and they are cost effective. And that's really what people are looking for. Something has to be pleasurable, or as Dean Ornish said a long, long time ago, sustainable changes must be pleasurable. And listen, if we had a healthier drink, but it tasted like mud water, we're probably not going to do that. If it tasted like mushroom soup, we're probably not going to do that. But healthy, delicious gourmet coffee and tea, or even cocoa for kids, yeah, those are in high demand, and ours are better. Now we go to Tony Robbins. I'm going to call it the Superman cube strategy. State in biggest letters because it's most important. We're going to multiply that by our story, the conversation we have with ourselves, and then finally our strategy. So state and story, the inner game. Our strategy is the outer game. And I'm going to let state go up to 100. If you show up as your best and getting better self, looking absolutely fantastic with great posture and really looking to add value, and you tell yourself a story, you know what, I can help, I can have anything in life I want if I help enough other people get what they want, and that'll take me straight to the top. And then finally, the strategy, those are the skills that we need to learn. So, if you give yourself a score, how you showing up, that is a multiplier. What's your story? That's a multiplier. And finally, what's your strategy or maybe your skill development? That is also a multiplier, but to a lesser extent. So as Tony Robbins would say about state, he calls it the third element. The most important element of success is your state. He said, you must replace a default state of pessimism or anger with one of determination, of will, of generosity, of curiosity, of gratitude. The more we can put ourselves in such beautiful states rather than suffering states, the more they become habits of being, and we end up making better decisions. So when you show up better, you know what, you actually inspire better, attract better, perform better. Everything gets better as you get better. And then Tony says there's three things you want to focus on. You want to focus on basically your physiology. He recommends really moving your body. Keep in mind, when you get your body in an excited state with the right spin on it, you don't want to get in an anxious state, but in an excited state, and then you get laser focus on what you're going for. Those are going to be the inner game, the 80%, but you still need some skills, that 20%. So how do we want to show up? Energized and empowered, and I might even throw the word ready to empower others. So Jordan Peterson has a phenomenal book, 12 Rules for Life, and his first rule is stand up straight with your shoulders down and back. And then he goes back to lobsters, which he say have been on the planet for billions of years. And the alpha lobster is going to stand up straight with its shoulders down and back, and it gets the best of everything, the best house, the best mates, the best environment, the best food, Whereas the losing lobster, well, it's got to go with whoever will go with the loser. And I hate to call anybody a loser. In fact, I wouldn't call anybody a loser, but Vince Lombardi said this. He said, show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. Kind of a harsh quote, but you know what? If you do your best, I'm going to call you a winner. Remember, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. How about we always, always, always learn, even when we win? And I heard, by the way, it's not trial and error, it's trial and advance, trial and learn. And you know what? We know that things that are not successes actually teach more. In fact, Jerry Jones said, I learned a lot more in life by getting my butt kicked than from any victory. And I first heard this from Stormy Wellington, but I'm not sure that she's the one that said it first. But she said, it's hard to sell the dream looking like a nightmare. So every time I see her, she's selling the dream. She's looking like not $1 million or $1 billion, but like $1 trillion. So look as your best self and show up as your best self. And then there's something called the charisma myth. You know, some people have it, some people don't. No, they said it's available to all of us. What do? We show up with absolute presence. When you're with someone, be with them. Don't have distractions. Very, very simply. Show up powerfully. That's your best in getting better self, shoulders down and back. And then finally, you want to be warm. If you're powerful and cold, people are going to be afraid. But if you're powerful and warm, they are going to be attracted. So show up, be with that person, be your best in getting better self, be warm, and always, always, always look to add value. Deepak Chopra, another sage of wisdom, he says, change your story, change your life. Basically, that's what it is. So your story becomes your life. A more empowering story, a more empowered life. So how about this story? I'm going to the top, but not alone. Who wants to join me? Remember, there's no traffic jam on the extra mile. Plenty of people are going to say, okay, yeah, I want to join, but who's willing to do the inner work? Who's willing to go the extra mile? If they are, then life with all of its beautiful rewards awaits them. So many lessons from great people like Sir Edmund Hillary. And here's what he said. He said, Mount Everest, you've defeated me once and you might defeat me again, but I'm coming back again and again. And I'm going to win because Mount Everest, you can't get any bigger, but I sure can. So he worked on his inner game. He did the training. He did the conditioning. And then he worked on his outer game. He developed the skills and he got to the very top of the world. And here's what he said. Look, it's not the mountain that we conquer, but we conquer ourselves. It's not the outer game. It is the inner game. So let's talk a moment with one of my late great mentors, Bob Proctor. You know what he said? Most people really don't know where they are in life. They don't have a really good, accurate presentation or representation of their starting point. But most people know where they want to go. They want to go in the direction of better. They want to move away from pain. They want to move towards pleasure. The question is, where are you in that inner game? And so keep in mind, some people, they haven't even thought about climbing the mountain. They don't know that the mountain's, halfway across the world. They might not even be able to see it. But if you make the decision to climb the mountain, well, you got to get to base camp. That's the opportunity that we're offering. And then how about a guided tour? And here's what I'll tell people. You know what? If you connect to your plugged in upline, your plugged in support, if you go with people who have been to the top or are well on their way, you have a lot better opportunity to get there faster and safer. And keep in mind, the job of the mountain guide is not to get you to the top, but it's to get you back safely. And by the way, I always want everyone to be safe in everything that they do. And keep in mind, that means that you've got to have a level of confidence, a level of capability, and then you have to keep things in perspective. So I love that picture. I don't know if you know who that is. If you're watching the video of this, that's a very, very young Cassius Clay who later became Muhammad Ali. And this golden circle has identity. That's your why. Who are you? Your actions, and then finally your feelings. Too many people go the opposite direction. They want their feelings to drive their actions. And if they don't feel like it, well, guess what? They don't do much. But Ali said this, I am the greatest. And he said it even before he knew that he was. Napoleon Hill called that autosuggestion. If you kept telling yourself, working on your inner game, telling yourself, I am the greatest. I'm going to become the greatest. It's worth it for me to become the greatest. Well, then you're on path to being the greatest. And Ali also said this: I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit, suffer now, and live the rest of your life as a champion. So, can you build a bridge from things that can be a grind to your best championship life? Yeah, we certainly all can. So, I like this. Don't ask yourself, how do I feel? But do ask yourself, who am I? How's my inner game? Am I building it to the point where I can consistently add value? And then George St. Pierre, one of the greatest UFC fighters of all time, he made a decision. And when he made his decision, here's what he said: I wasn't making sacrifices anymore. I was making decisions. Train instead of party, work instead of play, perfect practice instead of casual repetition. He said, I started living life with purpose and direction. Now, I want you to think about that. Make your decision and then figure out, what are you willing to give up? He was willing to give up some of the partying, certainly that which didn't move him in the best direction. Some of the play, he prioritized work over play, and then he always strived for perfect practice to be his best and get better. More on this wonderful mental game from Henry Ford. He said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're absolutely right. So work on that mindset, that mental game, that confidence, which, by the way, competence, skills does bring confidence, but it's all going to start with mindset. I love the movie Braveheart. So I'll use this picture from Braveheart as a very inspired leader. And very, very simply, inspired leaders know how to inspire. But there was a story about a general going into battle against very, very harsh odds, very low probability of succeeding. And he got in front of his troops. He says, all right, I've had a conversation with the gods. We will determine our destiny with a coin flip. There's nothing we can change. We'll have to flip the coin and see what it says. Heads, the gods are with us. We win. Tails, we lose. And oh, well, that's that. Well, guess what? The leader didn't tell him is he was flipping a two-headed coin. And the soldiers that saw heads come up said, they looked at it and they said, okay, destiny has spoken. The gods are on our side. Victory is ours. By the way, that's a very nice story. And I'm going to go to Abe Lincoln for a moment. Someone asked Abe Lincoln, he says, look, do you think God's on your side? And Abe said, well, that's none of my concern. I just want to be on God's side. So when you're on the side of everything good, everything noble, everything right, everything loving, you cannot help but win. When you start looking at battle or whatever you're doing, I love this quote: fear kills more dreams than failure. So, in fact, fear often gets people even from starting at all. So work on that inner game, basically make your dreams come true, and let your actions be driven by that level of motivation, inspiration, and confidence. Gabrielle Oettingen, PhD, wrote a book called Rethinking Positive Thinking. I'll even go with Jim Rohn. He says, is the cup half empty or half full? Well, realistically, it's both. And he asked the question, are you big enough to handle it? Well, hopefully we are. And here's one guy that definitely was: Admiral James Stockdale, who is the most decorated veteran that was in Vietnam prisoner of war camps. And it was called the Stockdale paradox. He said, you have to be honest with yourself to face the current reality. Some of that's going to be a little bit of the outer, but the reality is the outer, the honesty is the inner. And then ultimately, faith that you will prevail in the end. You have that kind of faith. If you know you're going to win, well, then it's easier to move forward. And they asked Stockdale, who won, who lost, who survived, who didn't? And he said, you know what? Those who thought it would be easy, they failed. They just kept having their hopes broken and broken and broken again. And finally, they were broken. But he said, those who knew they were in for the fight of their life and were ready for that fight, they survived. Well, think about it. We all have, you want to call it a fight, you want to call it a contest, you want to call it a mission. We're all here to show up as our best and getting better self in service to something bigger than ourselves. And certainly we need the faith that we will persevere. How easy is it to get to the top of the mountain? Hey, if you've never been there before, it's going to be hard. But here's what I can tell you, it will be worth it. So I remember listening to a story of a hiker that came down from Everest. And on this particular climb, he didn't make it to the top. And some people on his crew died. And the reporter looked at him and said, my God, how in the world, how could it be worth it trying to climb that mountain? And he looked at me and said, you know what? Obviously, you haven't been to the top. Once you're there, you realize that it's worth it. And I'll tell you what, building your network is hard, but it is absolutely worth it. And then how about this quote? Being positive in a negative situation is not naive, it's leadership. You've got to inspire hope among all those you hope to lead. And Art Williams, I highly recommend listening to his audios, reading his books. And he said it many, many times. No one will follow a negative, dull, disillusioned, frustrated, dadgum crybaby, or no one you want, right? So if you're a negative, dull, disillusioned, frustrated crybaby, that's what you're going to attract. We attract what we are, not necessarily what we want. Now, my favorite author, I think the greatest modern thinker. He's considered the world's happiest philosopher. His name is Tom Morris. He wrote a book called True Success and really the 7 C's of success, because all of his components start with the letter C. He said, you've got to have clarity. You've got to know where you're going. You got to have confidence to take a step in that direction and consistently take those steps. Show up as your best and getting better self. You've got to be committed no matter what. You will see this project through. Concentration is really focused effort. Be wherever you are, or wherever you are, be there. When you're with someone, be with them. If you're doing a task, do that task. Character, absolutely critical. He says, look, you can't make a good deal with a bad person. And then finally, contentment. Now, interestingly enough, he had interviewed a number of Fortune 500 CEOs and asked them, which of these do you have the greatest problem with? And I'll take a moment and ask you, which of these is your greatest challenge? Is it clarity? Is it confidence, consistency, commitment, concentration, character, contentment? Character probably is the greatest inside job that we're going to do. That's really the inner work. But these Fortune 500 CEOs said, you know what? It's contentment. I'm never happy. Well, here's what I'll tell you. Be happy along the way, but it's okay to reach for happier. Remember, you can have everything in life that you want if you help enough other people get what they want. Be content, but don't ever be satisfied. Be happy, but don't ever stop growing. And Zig Ziglar simplified it to 3 C's, I'll call it. He says it was character that got us out of bed, commitment that moves us into action, and discipline that enabled us to follow through. So I'm going to call that discipline the consistency. Then finally, there's Eric Worre, GoPro, 7 skills to become a network marketing professional. Number 1 is finding prospects. And I was listening to a sales audio this week, and it said, you know what? You want to pre-qualify your prospects. You want to make enough of a connection to find out, does this person have a need, a want, or a don't want? And remember what Einstein said. He said, if I had 1 hour to solve, a huge problem in the world, I'd spend 55 minutes trying to determine the right question. So when you're prospecting, don't go out to prospect, but prospect while you're out. Live your life. Show up as your best and getting better self. Start conversations. Ask people about themselves. And, finally, just ask some questions. Is there anything in your life that you would like to make better? As Jim Rohn would say, have you found the opportunity that will take care of you and your family for the rest of your life? And then finally, most people say, what? I didn't know there was such an opportunity. He says, well, I've got one. I've partnered with multiple millionaires. They're teaching me how to become independently wealthy within the next 5 years. Why don't you join me on Tuesday? I'll introduce you to my millionaire friends. And that, by the way, is the invitation. You want to create an irresistible invitation, an offer that they can't resist. If they're looking for something and you offer a path to it, it makes sense that they would just take a look. Now, when you're giving your presentation, when you are presenting, and you know what? Maybe you're not ready to present, so connect with someone who is, but ultimately, remember, he or she who holds the marker makes the money. but you want to customize the presentation to their needs, to their wants, to their don't wants. And then you're more likely to be able to show them that your way could be a good way for them, that our way is a good way for them. They say the fortune is in the follow-up. Well, I might want to go with the blessings are in the follow-up. And next one, instead of closing, Eric Worre says the fifth skill is closing. I'm going to say it's going to be transferring belief. And there's two reasons that people won't join an amazing opportunity to share better products with a patented competitive advantage. Either they don't believe in themselves. I think that's the biggest belief that people have to overcome with, or they don't believe in the business model. And when you show up with epic belief in both, you can transfer that belief piece by piece to that individual. We want people to start strong. Remember, success loves speed. So, you know what? How quickly can you invite friends to a Zoom to share the opportunity? Can you get 10 people on a Zoom tomorrow? And here's what I'll tell you. You get people on the Zoom in front of a leader and they share really what we have, and then you get them to try the products. Well, guess what? Some of these people are going to say yes to the opportunity. Some are going to say yes to the product. Some are going to say yes to both. And then finally, promoting events. That is the master skill. And that one certainly creates more belief and really helps people to work on that inner game. On the back of the book, My First 50 Years in Network Marketing, Harvey Connor says this: network marketing is the most powerful personal development university in the world, disguised as a business. And since it is a business, the more business you do, the more you get paid. Remember, we get paid by how many people we help and how much we help them. We're currently, Kelly and I, at 1 million healthier cups every single month. And I can tell you that's profoundly lucrative. And over the next 10 years, our goal is to 10x that. Remember what Harvey said: amateurs focus on skills, the outer game. Experts focus on psychology. That is the inner game. And it's like the 80-20 rule. Your beliefs, your self-image, your emotions, and those will lead to your communication style. That is going to be the inner game, which is 80%. Then your words, your actions, your deeds, how you interact with others. That is the outer game. To summarize again with 3 simple steps: become the greatest you. Consistently show up inspired and ready, and then add value to every single person who's open to receiving that value. And that will wrap up this week's conversation on mastering the inner game. And as always, I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolutely knowing that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful. So if you're in a dark part of the world or evening part of the world, good night and God bless. And if you're in a day part of the world, good day and God bless.